Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So before you get cozy, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. At 2:17 a.m., the emergency dispatcher in Pine Hollow County answered a call that would later be replayed in courtrooms, documentaries, and quiet living rooms where people sat too close to their televisions, afraid to blink. At first, there was only breathing. Not the panicked kind, no gasps, no sobs. Just slow, steady breaths, like someone trying very hard to stay calm. The dispatcher followed protocol, voice measured, professional. 911, what's your emergency? Silence. Then a faint sound. A creak, like would underweight, or a door opening where it shouldn't. Sir or ma'am, can you hear me? The breathing continued. Somewhere in the background, a television murmured. A laugh track. A joke landing in a room where no one laughed. The dispatcher marked the call as open line. She leaned closer to her headset. That was when she heard it. A woman's voice. Whispering. He said not to hang up. The line went dead. By sunrise, Pine Hollow would learn that the call came from 412 Briarwood Lane. A pale blue house at the edge of town, backed by woods so dense they swallowed sound. The house belonged to the Mercer family. Respected. Quiet. Ordinary in the way that made neighbors describe them with the same 3 words every time. Kept to themselves. Inside that house, police would find a scene so carefully arranged that, for the first few minutes, it almost looked peaceful. Almost. Pine Hollow was the kind of town where nothing happened loudly. It sat between 2 highways nobody used unless they were lost or desperate. 1 blinking traffic light. 1 high school. 1 diner that closed at 8 p.m. and served the same menu it had served since the 1980s. When people died there, it was usually old age, or farming accidents, or heart attacks that came quietly in recliners. Not murder. Certainly not this. Officer Daniel Reyes was first on scene. 26 years old. 3 months into his transfer from a bigger city where violence had background noise. Pine Hollow was supposed to be easier, safer, a place to breathe. He parked his cruiser behind an unmarked sedan already in the driveway. The front door of the Mercer house was slightly open, porch light still on, buzzing with insects. Reyes hesitated before stepping inside. That hesitation would follow him for the rest of his life. The air inside the house was cold. Too cold for early spring. The thermostat read 62 degrees. Someone had turned it down deliberately. The living room was immaculate. Couch cushions aligned. Coffee table cleared except for 1 object placed carefully in the center, a cordless phone. The screen still glowed. Call ended. 2:18 a.m. Reyes spoke into his radio. Dispatch, I'm inside the residence. I have an open line call confirmed. No response came back immediately. That was when he noticed the smell. Not blood. Not decay. Cleaning solution. Strong. Sharp. Recent. Reyes followed the smell down the hallway. 3 doors. 2 closed. 1 open at the end. The master bedroom. He stepped inside and stopped breathing. The Mercers were on the bed. Evan Mercer lay on his back, hands folded neatly over his chest. Eyes closed as if asleep. No visible wounds. No blood. His wife, Lila, lay beside him, turned slightly toward the window, hair brushed smooth against the pillow. They looked posed. Reyes reached out, gloved fingers trembling, and touched Evan's wrist. Cold. Too cold. Time of death would later be estimated at several hours before the 911 call, which raised the first question investigators couldn't answer. Who made the call? By mid-morning, Pine Hollow was crawling with state police. Yellow tape wrapped around Briarwood Lane like a warning nobody had seen coming. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering theories they'd later deny ever saying out loud. Detective Mara Holt arrived just after 9 a.m. She had grown up 2 counties over, left for the academy, and never looked back, until now. At 39, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. Her hair was pulled back tight, her eyes sharp, already cataloging details before anyone spoke. She stood in the Mercer bedroom, hands on her hips, and frowned. "This is wrong," she said. The medical examiner glanced up from his clipboard. "Wrong how?" Holt gestured at the bodies. "No defensive wounds. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. But also no obvious cause of death. Poison, someone suggested. Maybe, Holt said. But look at them. They're staged. This isn't just killing. This is presentation. She turned back to the living room and stared at the phone. Tell me about the call. The dispatcher's recording was played twice. Then a third time. Each time, the room grew quieter. The whisper replayed again. He said not to hang up. Holt felt something tighten in her chest. Who's he? She asked. No one answered. The autopsy results complicated everything. Cause of death, asphyxiation. Not manual strangulation. Not suffocation with a pillow. A chemical agent. Someone had released a gas into the house while the Mercers slept. A precise amount. Enough to kill them slowly, without panic, without waking. The killer had known exactly what they were doing. But the gas alone didn't explain the call. Which meant someone else had been alive in that house after Evan and Lila Mercer were already dead. That someone had been scared. And that someone had been following instructions. The Mercers had one child. 19-year-old Hannah Mercer. She was not in the house when police arrived. Her car was missing. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By noon, Pine Hollow had a new word buzzing through it like electricity. Missing. Detective Holt stood in the driveway, staring down Briarwood Lane toward the tree line. She imagined the woods at night. How sound disappeared there. How easy it would be to hide someone. Or to watch. She turned to Officer Reyes, who stood nearby, pale and quiet. You said the TV was on when you arrived? Yes, ma'am. Sitcom. Volume low. Was it on a timer? Reyes shook his head. No. Remote was on the couch. Like someone had just used it. Holt nodded slowly. Someone had been awake. Someone had been listening. At 4:46 p.m., Hannah Mercer's car was found abandoned 20 miles away, parked crookedly at a rural gas station off Highway 9. The keys were still in the ignition. Her backpack sat on the passenger seat. Inside it, her wallet, her ID, her cash, and a folded piece of paper with 6 words written in careful, deliberate handwriting. I did what you said. By nightfall, Pine Hollow County officially had its first homicide investigation in over a decade. By the end of the week, it would have a name the media would repeat until it lost all meaning. The Briarwood silence. But Detective Mara Holt knew something the headlines didn't. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. Because whoever made that call, they hadn't been asking for help. They had been checking in. Hannah Mercer had always been good at doing what she was told. Teachers described her as quiet but reliable. Coaches said she followed instructions to the letter. Friends, what few she had, joked that Hannah could be trusted to show up early to her own surprise party. Obedience wasn't weakness in Pine Hollow. It was survival. You learned early not to draw attention, not to ask questions that made adults uncomfortable, not to notice things that were easier left unseen. Hannah learned those lessons at home. The Mercer house had rules. Not the spoken kind, written on a fridge or taped to a wall, but the kind that lived in tone, timing, and silence. Rule 1. Don't wake your father after 10. Rule 2. Don't ask why your mother was crying. Rule 3. If Evan Mercer tells you to do something, you do it. Immediately. Evan Mercer was a respected man in Pine Hollow. He coached Little League. He organized charity drives. He shook hands firmly and looked people in the eye. At home, his voice never rose. That was what made it dangerous. Detective Mara Holt sat across from Hannah's empty bed that afternoon, staring at the neatly made sheets, the textbook stacked just so on the desk. Everything about the room screamed control. No posters. No mess. No rebellion. This isn't a runaway, Holt murmured. Officer Reyes nodded. Car was left like she wanted it found. Or like someone told her where to leave it. Holt opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a small digital recorder. Her jaw tightened. Hannah had started recording 3 months earlier. At first, it was accidental. She'd been recording a lecture for school when her father walked into her room without knocking. The way his voice changed, flat, measured, cold, made her press save instead of delete. After that, she recorded everything. The files were numbered, labeled by date. Holt slipped on headphones and pressed play. Evan Mercer's voice filled the room. If you hang up, they'll come faster. You don't want that. Holt froze. She checked the date. 2 nights before the murders. The recording continued. You stay calm. You follow instructions. And everyone stays safe. Hannah's voice followed. Small. Shaking. What if I mess up? A pause. Then your mother pays for it. Holt ripped the headphones off. This wasn't persuasion. This was training. The recordings painted a slow, horrifying picture. Evan Mercer had been preparing his daughter for something. Testing her obedience. Making her practice answering questions without giving answers. Teaching her how to sound calm while terrified. Teaching her how to lie. One recording stood out. When the phone rings, Evan said, you answer. Even if I tell you not to. Why? Hannah asked. Because sometimes help is more dangerous than silence. Detective Holt closed her eyes. The 911 call hadn't been Hannah's cry for rescue. It had been a test. But Evan Mercer was dead. So who was still giving orders? At the gas station where Hannah's car was found, investigators pulled security footage. The camera was old, the image grainy, but the timestamp was clear. 3:02 a.m. Hannah pulled in alone. She sat in the car for nearly 6 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Then headlights appeared behind her. Another vehicle. She didn't turn to look. She stepped out of the car. The footage caught just one clear detail before the car behind her rolled forward, blocking the camera's view. A man's silhouette. Tall. Broad shoulders. And something else. He was smiling. The gas station clerk remembered her. Poor kid looked half dead already, he said. Like she hadn't slept in days. Did she say anything? Holt asked. She asked if the bathroom was open. That's it. Anyone with her? He hesitated. There was a man. Didn't come inside. Just watched. Can you describe him? The clerk shook his head slowly. Felt wrong. That's all I got. Wrong was becoming a pattern. By day 3, the media descended. They framed Hannah as either victim or accomplice, depending on the hour and the headline. Social media dissected her smile from old yearbook photos. Comment sections decided her guilt with frightening certainty. She sounds calm on the call. Why didn't she scream? Girls like that know exactly what they're doing. Detective Holt refused to read any of it. She focused instead on Evan Mercer's past. And what she found there made her stomach turn. 10 years earlier, Evan Mercer had worked as a corrections officer at Briar Ridge Detention Center. 3 inmates under his supervision had died. Officially suicide. Overdose. Medical complication. Unofficially, each death had involved an open-line phone call. One inmate had called his sister and whispered, "He's here." Another called a legal aid office and stayed silent for over 3 minutes before the line disconnected. The third never spoke at all, just breathed. The calls were dismissed as coincidences. Until now. Mara Holt sat alone in her office that night, files spread out like pieces of a puzzle she desperately didn't want to complete. Evan Mercer hadn't just trained his daughter. He'd learned this somewhere, and someone had learned it with him. At 11:48 p.m., Holt's phone rang. Private number. She hesitated, then answered. Detective Holt. Breathing. Slow. Steady. A man's voice followed, amused. You found the recorder. Holt stood so fast her chair clattered behind her. Who is this? A soft chuckle. You already know. No, Holt snapped. I don't. You do, he said calmly. Because Evan told you. He just didn't know it yet. Holt's hand shook. Where is Hannah? A pause. She did very well, the voice said. Exactly what she was told. Is she alive? Another pause. Longer. Depends, he replied, on whether you can follow instructions too. The line went dead. Holt slammed the phone down, heart pounding. This wasn't a copycat. This wasn't revenge. This was continuation. Evan Mercer had been part of something bigger. A system. A shared language of fear and obedience. And when Evan died, the responsibility had passed, not to Hannah, but to the person who had always been watching. Training her. Testing her. Waiting. At 2:17 a.m. the next night, another call came into dispatch. Open line. Breathing. This time, the whisper said only 3 words. She's still listening. The dispatcher on duty that night had learned, the hard way, not to trust silence. After the Briarwood call, Pine Hollow County had issued new internal guidance. Any open line after midnight gets immediate escalation. No waiting. No assumptions. So when the phone lit up at 2:17 a.m., The same minute, down to the second, the dispatcher's stomach dropped. She didn't say hello. She just listened, breathing, slow, controlled. Then the whisper came, closer to the receiver than before. She's still listening. The dispatcher's hand hovered over the panic button. "Who is this?" she asked, voice steady by force alone. Silence. Then a sound that made her blood run cold. A smile audible through the phone. Detective Mara Holt was already awake when the call came in. She hadn't slept since the private number call the night before. She sat at her kitchen table surrounded by Evan Mercer's old files, photographs, transcripts of disciplinary hearings that never led anywhere. When her phone rang, she answered before it completed the first vibration. "They called again," the dispatcher said. Same time, same breathing. Holt closed her eyes. "Trace. Already working it. But you know how this goes. Disposable phones. Signal hops. Digital smoke." Holt grabbed her coat. "I'm coming in." At headquarters, the recording played on a loop. No background noise this time. No TV. No creaking floors. Just breath. And the whisper. "He's learning," Holt murmured. Reyes frowned. "Learning what?" "How much we're willing to move," she said. "How fast we react. How predictable we are." This wasn't about Hannah anymore. This was about control. The trace finally came back with something, barely. The call had pinged off a tower near Pine Hollow Lake. An old recreational area. Cabins. Trails. Mostly abandoned this time of year. Holt's pulse quickened. "Get a unit out there. Quiet. No lights." As officers mobilized, Holt studied the lake on the map. One access road. Thick tree cover. Long sight lines. A perfect place to watch someone approach. Or to make another call. They found the phone near the water's edge. Placed upright on a rock. Still warm. But no sign of the caller. Reyes scanned the tree line. "He wanted us to find it." "Yes," Holt said. "He always does." Near the phone lay something else. A small object wrapped in plastic. Holt crouched and peeled it open. A USB drive. Back at headquarters, the tech team loaded the drive in a sandbox environment. One video file. No title. No metadata. Holt stood behind the analyst as the screen flickered to life. The image was dim, grainy. A single overhead bulb swayed slightly, casting shadows that made the room feel like it was breathing. Hannah Mercer sat in a chair. Her hands were free. Her posture straight. Her face calm. Too calm. She looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," she said evenly, "it means I did what he told me to." Holt swallowed. Hannah continued. "He said I shouldn't cry. That crying makes people rush. He doesn't like that." A man's voice off camera chuckled softly. "Good," he said. "Very good." Holt's hands clenched into fists. "He told me to explain," Hannah went on, "that this isn't about my parents. They were part of something that hurt people. This is about balance." She paused. "And about practice." The video cut to black. Silence filled the room. Then Reyes spoke. "Practice for what?" Holt already knew. For a bigger audience. At 4:03 a.m., a call came into a local radio station. Open line. The host, half asleep and annoyed, tapped the mic. "You're on the air." Breathing. Then the whisper. "Listen carefully." The station cut the call after 6 seconds. Too late. Within an hour, the clip was everywhere. Pine Hollow woke to panic. The man wasn't hiding anymore. He was teaching. Holt revisited the old Briar Ridge files with new eyes. Evan Mercer's name appeared again and again, not as the accused, but as the note-taker. The observer. The one who documented reactions. He'd worked under a senior officer. Name Caleb Rourke. Discharged 8 years ago. Reason, unethical conduct. Unofficial reason? Inmate psychological manipulation. Rourke specialized in compliance conditioning. Teaching people to follow instructions under stress. Teaching them to remain calm while terrified. Teaching them to obey voices. Rourke had vanished after his discharge. No fixed address. No digital footprint. But he'd left behind students. Evan Mercer had been one of them. Holt felt sick. Evan hadn't been the architect. He'd been a participant. And now, a failed subject. That night, Holt went home and didn't turn on the lights. She sat in the dark and waited. At 2:17 a.m., her phone rang. Private number. She answered. I knew you would, the voice said warmly. Rourke, Holt said. A soft laugh. Ah, so you are learning. What do you want? Holt demanded. To see if you can listen, he replied. Evan couldn't. He started making mistakes. You killed him. No, Rourke said gently. I corrected him. Where is Hannah? She's safe, he said. For now. She understands the rules. Holt's jaw tightened. This ends. Oh no, Rourke said. This is the part where it begins. A pause. Tomorrow night, he continued, someone else will listen. Someone you don't know. And if you fail, his voice softened. She'll pay for it. The line went dead. Holt sat motionless. She had one night. One chance to break a system built on fear, patience, and obedience. And the man on the other end of the line, he believed no one ever did. Caleb Rourke believed rules only mattered if people were afraid to break them. That was the first thing Detective Mara Holt understood as dawn crept over Pine Hollow. Rourke wasn't improvising. He wasn't reacting. He was executing a framework, one refined over years, built on silence, obedience, and the slow erosion of will. And frameworks always had rules. By 7 a.m., Holt had assembled a task force so small it bordered on reckless. No press, no state police, no federal escalation. Just Holt, Reyes, a behavioral analyst named Dr. Simone Adler, and 2 tech officers she trusted with her life. If Rourke suspected a crowd, he'd disappear. Or worse, he'd accelerate. Dr. Adler listened to the call recordings twice, then leaned back slowly. He doesn't threaten the way most predators do, she said. He educates. Every interaction is a lesson. He's teaching compliance, conditioning listeners to associate silence with safety. Like Hannah, Reyes said quietly. Yes, Adler replied, but also like Evan Mercer, and the inmates before him. Holt rubbed her temples. So what are the rules? Adler stood and wrote on the board. Rule 1, speak only when instructed. Rule 2, calm equals survival. Rule 3, authority is invisible but absolute. She underlined the last one. He never appears physically unless necessary, Adler said. His power comes from distance, from the voice. And the calls? Holt asked. Check-ins, Adler said. Reinforcement. He's making sure the conditioning holds. Holt stared at the board. Then let's break the rules. At 11:19 a.m., the team got their first crack. A 911 call came in, not from Rourke, but from a woman named Ellen Price. 48. School secretary. No criminal history. The call was open line. Breathing. Dispatch froze. Then Ellen whispered, he told me to wait. Holt was already moving. Ellen Price's house sat 3 streets over from the Mercer place. Same architectural style. Same era. Same quiet isolation. Too similar. Officers surrounded the home silently. No sirens. No announcements. Holt entered through the back. Ellen sat at the kitchen table, hands folded neatly, phone on speaker in front of her. Her eyes flicked up when Holt entered, but she didn't speak. On the phone, breathing. Then Rourke's voice. Very good, he said. You're calm. Holt stepped forward. Caleb Rourke. This is Detective Holt. Silence. Then a low chuckle. Rule violation, Rourke said. That wasn't your turn. Ellen flinched. Holt raised her hands slowly. Ellen, you're safe. He can't hurt you. Rourke sighed. Detective, do you hear that? Holt listened. Ellen's breathing had quickened. Her calm is breaking, Rourke said softly. That's on you. Holt swallowed hard. What do you want? To see if you can listen, he replied. Like she is. A long pause. Then Rourke spoke again, firm now. Ellen. End the call. Ellen's hand hovered over the phone. Holt locked eyes with her. Don't. Ellen trembled. Rourke's voice sharpened. Now. Ellen pressed end. The line went dead. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Ellen burst into tears. She was alive. Unharmed. Holt exhaled shakily. Rourke hadn't punished her. Which meant, he's escalating, Adler said later. Withholding consequences is part of the conditioning. He's building confidence for himself. And for Holt, it meant one thing. Rourke was preparing a bigger test. That test came at 2:17 a.m. Of course it did. But this time, the call didn't go to dispatch. It went to Holt's personal phone. She answered in silence. Breathing. Then his voice. You interfered. Yes, Holt said. And she lived. For now, Rourke replied. You're missing the lesson. Enlighten me. You still think this is about saving people, he said. It's not. It's about teaching them to survive. By breaking them? Holt snapped. No, he said calmly. By showing them how fragile choice is. Holt closed her eyes. Where is Hannah? A pause. Then, listening. The next morning, the USB drive arrived. No return address. Inside, another video. Hannah again, but standing this time. Behind her, a whiteboard. Written in thick black marker. Rules of silence. Hannah spoke clearly. Rule 1. You don't speak unless you're told. Rule 2. You don't ask questions. Rule 3. You don't panic. Rule 4. If you're calm, you live. She hesitated. And Rule 5. Rourke stepped into frame for the first time. Not fully. Just his shoulder. His jaw. Rule 5, he said, is that everyone listens eventually. The video ended. Dr. Adler's face had gone pale. He's preparing a broadcast, she said. Mass conditioning. He wants an audience. And Hannah? Reyes asked. She's proof of concept. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. One of the tech officers flagged an anomaly, background interference on the calls. A faint rhythmic clicking, not random, repeating every 12 seconds. Railroad signals. Holt's heart pounded. There's an abandoned switching station near Pine Hollow Lake, Reyes said. Shut down years ago. Holt grabbed her jacket. That's where he's staging from. But Hannah, Reyes began. She won't be there, Holt said grimly. He never keeps the subject near the control room. They found the station just after midnight. Dark. Silent. Power long gone. Inside, dusty monitors. Old chairs. And a single active device. A laptop. On screen, a timer. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Counting down. Holt's phone rang. Rourke. You found the classroom, he said pleasantly. But you're late. What have you done? Holt demanded. I've given her a choice, he replied. Something I never did before. The timer hit 0. Across Pine Hollow, every local station cut to emergency override. A live feed. Hannah Mercer, standing alone, looking directly into the camera. I'm allowed to speak now, she said. Holt's blood ran cold. Because tonight, Hannah continued, you're the ones who have to listen. The broadcast hijacked Pine Hollow at exactly 2:17 a.m. Every television, every radio, every phone with notifications enabled. Static bled into Hannah Mercer's face, pale, steady, framed against a blank wall that gave nothing away. No windows, no clues, just her, centered, composed. Too composed. Detective Mara Holt stood in the abandoned switching station, staring at the laptop as if it might bleed answers if she looked hard enough. Dr. Adler whispered, she's dissociated. Hannah began to speak. I was told silence keeps you alive, she said evenly. I was told calm makes you invisible. Her eyes didn't blink. But I learned something else. Behind her voice, a low tone pulsed, almost subliminal. A metronome. Conditioning layered on conditioning. I learned that silence also hides the person giving orders. The feed flickered. Rourke's voice cut in, calm warning. Hannah, remember Rule 1. She inhaled slowly, then exhaled. No, she said. For the first time since this began, Holt felt hope. In homes across Pine Hollow, people leaned closer to their screens. The broadcast wasn't loud. It didn't shout or threaten. That was what made it terrifying. He taught me to listen for breathing, Hannah continued. To measure pauses. To obey tone instead of words. Her gaze sharpened. But he never taught me what happens when everyone listens at once. The metronome sound stuttered. Rourke's voice returned, less amused now. You're breaking protocol. Yes, Hannah replied. That's the point. At the switching station, the tech officer shouted. Signal origin is bouncing. He's not here. Holt slammed her hand against the desk. Find him. Another call came in on Holt's phone. She answered on speaker. Rourke's voice was tighter now, controlled but strained. She's improvising, he said. You've contaminated the lesson. You did that yourself, Holt snapped. You gave her a voice. Silence. Then Rourke spoke again, slower. Every subject fails eventually, he said. That's why we escalate. Holt's stomach dropped. What did you do? Rourke didn't answer. On screen, Hannah's composure cracked, just slightly. He told me, she said, that if I spoke without permission, someone else would pay. A tear slid down her cheek. My mother already did. Gasps rippled through the town. But he said it would be worse next time. Hannah looked down. Someone in Pine Hollow is listening right now, she said softly. Someone he chose. Holt's blood turned to ice. At dispatch, alarms erupted. Open lines flooded in. Dozens. Breathing. Whispers. People repeating the same phrase, over and over. He told me to stay calm. Rourke had seeded the town. Dozens of Ellens. This wasn't a test. It was an experiment. Dr. Adler grabbed Holt's arm. He's forcing a mass response. If you countercommand publicly, you become the authority. Or I kill them, Holt said. Yes, Adler replied. But if you stay silent, he wins anyway. Holt looked back at Hannah on the screen, at the girl who had learned every rule, and was now breaking them. Holt stepped forward into the camera feed's return channel. Her voice went live across Pine Hollow. This is Detective Mara Holt, she said clearly. Everyone listening, hear me. Rourke's voice cut in instantly. No, Holt continued. You are not in danger for speaking. You are not in danger for hanging up. The person controlling you is lying. Breathing spiked across the open lines. Rourke shouted, Stop. Holt didn't. You don't need to be calm, she said. You need to be human. For a heartbeat, the town held its breath. Then, someone screamed. A phone disconnected. Then another. Then dozens. The silence shattered. Rourke's voice was no longer calm. You've ruined everything, he hissed. No, Holt said. You did. By underestimating her. On screen, Hannah straightened. You told me everyone listens eventually, she said. You were wrong. She reached up. The feed jolted. The metronome stopped. Static swallowed the screen. Trace him now. Holt shouted. Tech fingers flew. A location hit. Not Pine Hollow Lake. Not the switching station. A moving signal. A vehicle. Holt grabbed her keys. Where is Hannah? Reyes asked. Holt's jaw set. Wherever he's going. Because for the first time, Caleb Rourke wasn't teaching. He was running. The signal moved fast. Too fast for back roads. Too deliberate for panic. He's on Route 9, the tech officer said, voice tight. Southbound. Speed steady. He wants us to follow. Mara Holt slid behind the wheel before the sentence finished. Headlights cut through the dark as her cruiser tore onto the highway. Reyes followed close behind. No sirens. No radio chatter. Rourke had trained them too well to announce themselves. He's still controlling the pace, Reyes said. Yes, Holt replied. This is his final lesson. The live broadcast had gone dark, but its aftershocks rippled everywhere. Dispatch lines were chaos. People crying, shouting, apologizing for not being calm enough. Officers were dispatched to homes across Pine Hollow, finding shaken residents alive, untouched, terrified of a man who had never been in the room. Rourke hadn't needed to hurt them. Fear had done the work. Except for one person. Hannah. The signal slowed near an industrial stretch abandoned after the paper mill closed. Rusted fences. Crumbling warehouses. A place where sound echoed and nobody came unless they meant to disappear. He's stopping, Reyes said. Holt pulled in behind a long, windowless van parked beside Warehouse C. The engine was still running. The passenger door was open. Inside, the floor was bare metal. And in the center, a chair. Empty. Holt's chest tightened. No, she whispered. Rourke's phone rang before she could move. She answered. You followed beautifully, he said, almost proud. You always were my most promising variable. You don't get to talk like that, Holt said. This is over. Rourke laughed softly. That's what Evans said, right before he failed. Where is she? A pause. She's listening, Rourke replied. Like you taught her. I didn't teach her anything, Holt snapped. Yes, you did, he said. You showed her what happens when silence breaks. Holt stepped fully into the warehouse. The sound of her boots echoed too loudly. You said you were testing obedience, Holt said. But this isn't about that. You need witnesses. You need proof. I need completion, Rourke corrected. A final instruction. Lights flickered on overhead. Hannah stood at the far end of the warehouse. Unrestrained. Alive. Her eyes met Holt's. She didn't look afraid. She looked ready. Rourke's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Hannah," he said calmly, "Rule 5. Hannah inhaled. Holt shouted, "Don't listen to him." Hannah raised her hand slightly. "Rule 5, she said, steady but shaking, "is that everyone listens eventually." Rourke's voice softened. "Good. Now listen to this. A beat. Walk to the door. Don't look back." Hannah took one step. Holt froze. This was it. The last instruction. If Hannah obeyed, Rourke won, even if Holt caught him. Control didn't need survival. It just needed proof. "Hannah," Holt said, lowering her voice, "look at me." Hannah hesitated. Rourke snapped, eyes forward. Holt ignored him. "You already broke his rules," Holt said gently. "You spoke. You chose. That means you don't belong to him anymore." Hannah's breathing quickened. Rourke's tone sharpened. "You're losing calm." Hannah stopped walking. Her hands clenched. "I was calm when my mother died," she said quietly. Silence crashed through the warehouse. Even Rourke didn't speak. "I was calm when you told me to stay quiet," Hannah continued. "And when you told me to listen." She turned, looked directly at the nearest camera. "But you never told me what to do when you were wrong." The speakers exploded with feedback. Rourke screamed, "Stop." Hannah stepped away from the door, toward Holt. "I'm done listening," she said. A gunshot cracked through the warehouse. Reyes tackled Holt as the bullet shattered a light above them. Officers swarmed from every entrance. The speakers went dead. Somewhere deeper in the building, footsteps pounded, then stopped. Then nothing. They found Rourke in a control room behind false walls. No weapon in hand. No fight left. Just a man staring at silent monitors. "They weren't calm," he whispered when Holt approached. "They were supposed to stay calm." Holt cuffed him without a word. For the first time, he didn't resist. Hannah sat on the warehouse floor wrapped in a blanket as dawn crept through broken windows. Holt crouched beside her. "You're safe," Holt said. Hannah nodded once. "I know." After a moment, she asked, "Will he still talk to me?" "No," Holt said firmly. "He doesn't get to anymore." Hannah closed her eyes. Relief finally broke through. As Rourke was led away, he turned to Holt one last time. "You think this ends it," he said quietly. "But silence always comes back." Holt met his gaze. "So does noise." The town didn't sleep after Caleb Rourke was arrested. Pine Hollow lay awake in a strange, trembling quiet. The kind that comes not from peace, but from the absence of a sound you've been bracing yourself to hear. Phones sat untouched on nightstands. Television stayed dark. People held their breath without realizing they were doing it. Because after days of being told when to breathe, when to stay calm, when to listen, silence felt dangerous. Hannah Mercer spent her first night free in a hospital room 2 counties away. Doctors said she was physically unharmed. Dehydrated, exhausted, elevated cortisol levels that would take months to normalize. No one mentioned trauma out loud. Detective Mara Holt sat in the chair by her bed, long past the end of her shift. "Do you still hear him?" Holt asked gently. Hannah considered the question. "Sometimes," she said, "but now I know it's not real. It's like an echo. That will fade," Holt said. Hannah nodded. "I hope so." Then, after a long pause, "I didn't know how loud fear was until it stopped." Holt felt that settled deep in her chest. The evidence room filled quickly. Phones, recorders, USB drives, notebooks filled with meticulous handwriting, logs of breathing patterns, response times, voice modulation notes. Rourke hadn't just studied people. He'd cataloged them. Dr. Adler stood over one notebook, face pale. "He wasn't improvising victims," she said. "He was building a curriculum." "How many?" Reyes asked. Adler didn't answer right away. "More than we'll ever know," she said finally. Media pressure exploded. Rourke's face dominated screens nationwide. Former inmates came forward with stories eerily similar to Hannah's. Voices in the dark, instructions whispered through phones, obedience rewarded with survival. But the town of Pine Hollow refused interviews. They closed ranks. This was their wound. At the arraignment, Rourke stood straight, expression neutral. He didn't look at Hannah. He didn't look at Holt. When the judge asked if he understood the charges, he answered calmly, "Yes," as if compliance still mattered. Holt watched from the back of the courtroom. She expected anger. She felt none, only exhaustion. And something else. unease. Because Rourke hadn't screamed when he was caught. He hadn't begged. He'd gone quiet. 2 weeks later, the first death occurred. An inmate at Briar Ridge Detention Center. Open line call to his mother. Breathing. Then silence. Ruled a suicide. Holt stared at the report, heart pounding. They said he was a former associate of Rourke, Reyes said quietly. Minimal contact. Years ago. Holt shook her head. No. What? He wouldn't do it himself, she said. He's too proud. You think? I think the lesson survived him. Hannah was released into protective custody under a new name. Before she left, she handed Holt something. The digital recorder. I don't need this anymore, Hannah said. But you might. Holt accepted it carefully. Thank you for listening, Hannah added. Holt watched her walk away. Stronger than anyone would ever know. That night, Holt went home and sat alone in the dark. She didn't turn on the TV. She didn't check her phone. She just listened. For nothing. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message. No number. Just text. Are you calm? Holt's breath caught. Then she typed back. I'm awake. 3 dots appeared, then vanished. The phone went silent. Across Pine Hollow, a radio crackled to life for half a second. Breathing. Then, static. Holt leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Rourke was gone. But fear had a longer shelf life than men. And silence? Silence remembered everything. The problem with silence was that it never stayed empty. Detective Mara Holt learned that in the weeks after Rourke's arrest, when Pine Hollow tried to return to the rhythm it had always known. The diner reopened past sunset. The high school held its spring assembly. The blinking traffic light blinked like it always had. But something underneath had shifted. People flinched at ringing phones. Dispatchers hesitated before answering open lines. And every night, without meaning to, half the town checked the clock at 2:17 a.m. Fear had learned the schedule. Dr. Simone Adler called it residual conditioning. When someone controls you through repetition, she explained, the absence of the controller doesn't immediately free you. The brain fills the gap. With what? Holt asked. Adler didn't hesitate. Expectation. The second incident happened in a grocery store. A teenage cashier froze mid-scan when her phone rang in her pocket. She stood there, breathing steadily, eyes unfocused, repeating softly, stay calm. Stay calm. No voice on the line. No instruction. Just silence. By the time someone snapped her out of it, she was shaking uncontrollably. Holt added another mark to the board. Not Rourke. Not direct contact. Still compliant. The echo was spreading. The task force grew again, quietly. Psychologists. Trauma specialists. Signal analysts. No one said it out loud, but they all felt it. This case didn't end with an arrest. It ended with deprogramming an entire town. Then the recordings started surfacing. Anonymous uploads. Old voicemails. Audio clips pulled from forgotten devices. Breathing. Pauses. A familiar cadence. But the voice wasn't Rourke's. It was younger. Less refined. An imitation. Copycats. Reyes asked. Holt shook her head. No. Students. They traced the first upload to a college student 3 states away. Former juvenile inmate. Spent 6 months at Briar Ridge. He says Rourke never spoke to him directly, Adler said after reviewing the interview. Just listened. Corrected others. Modeled behavior. Holt felt cold. Rourke hadn't needed to teach everyone. He'd taught a few. The rest learned by watching. That night, Holt listened to Hannah's old recorder again. She'd avoided it since the warehouse. But now she needed to understand what lingered. One file had never been played. Labeled simply Echo. She pressed play. Hannah's voice quiet. If you're hearing this, it means he's gone. But it also means you're still listening. A pause. He said echoes mean the lesson worked. Holt swallowed. But echoes fade, Hannah continued. Only if you answer them with something louder. The recording ended. At 2:17 a.m. the next night, Holt didn't wait. She made the call herself. A public address override. Every local station. Every frequency. No breathing. No whisper. Just her voice. This is Detective Mara Holt, she said. If you're listening because you're afraid, you don't have to be calm anymore. You don't have to be quiet. Fear loses power when it's heard. She paused. And if you think silence is control, remember this. She took a breath. Silence filled the airwaves. Then she ended the broadcast. The next morning, something changed. Dispatch reported fewer open lines. Hospitals saw fewer panic episodes. The clock still read 2:17, but fewer people looked at it. The echo didn't vanish, but it weakened. Rourke watched none of it. In his cell, he sat motionless, refusing interviews, refusing calls. When Holt visited him one final time, he didn't smile. "They're still listening," he said quietly. Holt leaned forward. "No," she replied. "They're learning when not to." For the first time, Rourke looked uncertain. Weeks later, Hannah sent a letter. No return address. Just 6 words written in careful handwriting. The echo is quieter now. Holt folded the letter and placed it in the case file. Closed. Almost. Because echoes never truly disappeared. They just waited. Choice made a sound. Not a loud one. Not the kind that shattered windows or set off alarms. It sounded like hesitation. Like breath taken without permission. Detective Mara Holt noticed it first in herself. 3 months after the arrest, Pine Hollow no longer flinched at every ring, but nobody trusted quiet either. The town existed in a fragile middle space, learning how to live without instructions. Holt stood in the hallway outside Dispatch one evening, listening to the normal noise of work. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, low voices overlapping. Ordinary sounds. Yet every time a call came in and stayed open too long, the room still paused. Not out of fear. Out of choice. Someone always decided whether to speak first. The call that changed everything came in at 2:17 a.m. Of course it did. Open line. Breathing. But this time, the dispatcher didn't freeze. She leaned into the mic. 911, she said calmly. You don't have to stay silent. A pause. Then a woman spoke. He told me if I talked, I'd fail. The dispatcher shook her head slowly, though the caller couldn't see her. You're already succeeding, she said. You're talking. The line stayed open. And for the first time since Briarwood Lane, no one whispered. Holt arrived to find a young woman sitting on the curb outside her apartment, wrapped in a blanket, shaking but alive. No signs of restraint. No injuries. Just fear. He never called again, the woman said. After I spoke, Holt felt something settle inside her. The echo wasn't gone, but it was losing authority. The trial began quietly. No spectacle. No grandstanding. Caleb Rourke sat through testimony without expression as former inmates described voices that trained them to obey, as psychologists explained conditioning, as Hannah Mercer, face shielded, voice steady, described learning to mistake calm for safety. When asked why she finally spoke, Hannah answered simply, because silence was louder than fear. Rourke looked up at that. Just once. Outside the courthouse, Holt stood with Dr. Adler. You hear it? Adler asked. Hear what? Adler smiled faintly. The space between responses. People thinking before reacting. Choice. The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Life without parole. Rourke didn't react. But when he was led away, he said one last thing, quiet enough that only Holt heard it. They'll still listen when it's dark. Holt didn't argue. She didn't need to. Months passed. Pine Hollow changed in small, meaningful ways. Dispatch added a new protocol, open line reassurance. Schools taught students how to recognize coercive silence. The diner stayed open past midnight, just because it could. At 2:17 a.m., Holt often sat awake, not out of fear, but habit. One night, her phone rang. Private number. She answered. Silence. No breathing. No whisper. Just an open line. Holt waited. Then she spoke. You don't get control anymore. The line disconnected. Hannah's final letter arrived that spring. No fear in the handwriting. No rules. Just one sentence. Choice is louder than silence. Holt placed it on her desk and leaned back, listening to the sounds of the station around her. Life. Messy. Noisy. Human. Exactly the way Rourke hated it. The line didn't go dead all at once. It faded, like a sound carried too far, stretched too thin to mean anything anymore. That was how Detective Mara Holt knew it was finally over. The last open line call came in on an ordinary Tuesday. No timestamp significance. No pattern. No performance. Just a phone left off the hook by an elderly man who had fallen asleep in his recliner. Dispatch stayed on the line for 3 minutes, speaking gently, reassuringly, until he woke up confused and embarrassed. No fear. No whisper. No obedience. When the call ended, no one checked the clock. Pine Hollow learned how to be noisy again. Children shouted across yards. Cars honked impatiently at the blinking traffic light. The diner installed a jukebox that someone always set too loud. Silence lost its authority. Caleb Rourke aged quickly in prison. Without an audience, without subjects, his theories shriveled. Guards reported that he tried to instruct them at first, subtle corrections, measured tone. They ignored him. That hurt more than resistance ever could. Eventually, he stopped speaking. Hannah Mercer testified once more before disappearing into a life the public would never know. College. A new name. A city that didn't know her past. When asked by a counselor what she feared most now, she answered honestly, being quiet when I don't want to be. Mara Holt stayed in Pine Hollow. She could have transferred. Bigger departments. Better funding. But she stayed. Someone had to remember what silence could do. On the anniversary of the Briarwood murders, Holt drove past 412 Briarwood Lane. The house was empty now. For sale. Fresh paint. New windows. But the woods behind it were the same, dense, soundless. Holt sat in her car for a long moment. Then she rolled down the window. Let the noise in. That night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Holt's phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification. No new voicemails. She smiled, set the phone face down, and slept. Because when the line finally goes dead, what's left isn't silence. It's choice. And choice, once learned, is impossible to unhear.